Okay, so in our previous lesson, we created our skin surface, which is this one we see over here, in which you can see we have certain openings in which you can access those spaces. And the idea now is going to be to create a definition that allows us to create some waffle-like or rib-like structures for it. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to go ahead and open our Grasshopper window. And the first thing that I'm going to do is to start referencing all the parameters that we're going to be using. So to start, I'm going to call a vrep parameter. And I'm going to go ahead and reference our surface. So I'm going to right click over here, set one vrep, and I'm going to select my surface. Then the next thing that I'm going to reference is this curve we created in our previous lesson. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to call a curve parameter. And again, I'm going to go ahead and reference it. So I'm going to right click, set one curve, and now we have it captured over here. And the last two parameters that we are going to reference are the couple of planes that we created over here. So to reference these planes, I'm going to call a couple of vrep parameters again. And I'm going to reference one by one. So I'm going to right click here, set one vrep. I'm going to select the first one and I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the other one. So I'm going to copy this one, right click, set one vrep and select the other one. Okay, so once we have done this, I can go ahead and hide all these geometries so we can work better. And the next thing that we're going to do is to locate a set of perpendicular frames around this curve that we have over here. So to do that, I'm going to call a perpendicular frame component, which is this one over here. And as an input, I'm going to put my curve. And by default, it creates a set of frames over here. I'm going to add a slider so I can control the number of frames that we're going to have. So in this case, I'm going to type something like 200 to create our slider. And I'm going to go ahead and plug it into my end input. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this component so it doesn't look that cluttered. And the next thing that we want to do here is to orient these frames or surfaces that we're going to use as intersection planes through all those frames that we have just created. Okay, so I'm going to call my orient component. So I'm going to type orient. And as my base geometry, I'm going to use one of these two planes that we have over here. And as my initial plane, I'm going to leave it as it is. And the reason why this is because we actually created our surface exactly aligned where the plane needs to be. So I'm going to leave it like that. And then for my final plane, I'm going to select all these frames that we have created over here. Okay, so now you should see all these surfaces being oriented throughout our whole surface. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do here is to intersect these surfaces with our host surface that we have over here. So to do that, I'm going to call a vrep with vrep interception component. So I simply need to type vrep and vrep, and you'll see this component over here. So as my first vrep, I'm going to select my host surface, which is this one. And as my second vrep, I'm going to select all these surfaces that we have over here. Then I'm going to go ahead and hide all these surfaces. And as you can see here, we have created all these strips or lines throughout our whole surface. So the next thing we need to do is to create the other ones in the opposite direction to create our ribs. So I'm gonna go ahead and repeat this process. I'm gonna call again an orient component, and in this case I can simply copy this one and this time reference this other surface that I have over here. And I can also go ahead and copy this component and intersect it with this new set of surfaces. And if I go ahead and hide this host surface, you'll notice that we have created our stereotomy in a diagrid disposition, which is not kind of the standard way of doing it, which is why this is also a little bit more interesting. And as you can see, it goes throughout our whole skin. I'm gonna hide these surfaces so we can see it better. And the last thing we are missing here is to simply give these lines a thickness, or sorry, a depth, so we can start creating some surfaces with them. So the easiest way in which we can do this is by offsetting these two sets of lines. So here I'm gonna call an offset component, and I'm gonna use the curved version of that one, which is this one. And then as my curves to offset, I'm gonna input these curves that I have over here. And as you can see, we have started to offset these sets of curves. So I can control the distance, and for that I'm gonna go ahead and create a slider. And in this case I'm gonna type 0.5, as I want it to be more or less of that thickness. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do the same for the other sets of curves. In this case, you can see that my offset is being done in the opposite direction, so I can simply solve this by adding an expression to this input. So I'm gonna right click, and here in my expression type, I'm gonna type x time minus 1. And what this will do is that it will take any value that comes from this input and it will multiply it by -1. So in that way, we're gonna have our both set of offset going on the same direction. Okay, so the last thing we're missing here is to use these curves to create some surfaces. The easiest way to create this is by using a loft component. So I'm gonna go ahead and call one of those. And I'm gonna connect my first set of curves over here. And then I'm going to call the panel component just to see how these branches are organized, and I'm sure that I can match them. So as you can see here, I have a branch with 3 levels of depth. And here on this offset component, I have a branch with 4 because this data comes inherited from this one. So what I need to do is to reduce one level of depth over here. And the easiest way to do that is by calling a shift path component. Here I'm going to make sure that this value is set to -1, as that is the number of places that we want to reduce. And then I'm going to simply connect it here. And as you can see now, we have the same level of depth that we have over here. So we should be able to create our loft. So the next thing I'm going to do is to press my shift key and connect to this component. And as you can see, our set of surfaces is being created. So the last thing would be to do the same for the other ones. Again, I'm gonna call a shift path. I'm gonna plug it to my offset component, and I'm gonna go ahead and call another loft component. I'm gonna plug it to these sets of curves. I'm gonna press my shift key, and I'm gonna hook it up to this one over here. Okay, so then I can simply select all these and hide it. And as you can see, we have created a skin-like geometry made out of ribs.